Hello, welcome to Be the Glitter podcast. This is your host, Laura Paisley Beck, otherwise known as Wham of Wham Rights. And today we get to meet LP. She's an amazing founder of this tech startup called Houstory, where she uses story to expose the biases of landlords. I think that's going to be quite an amazing app to watch grow. We also talk about identity through home, history, and culture. We also talk about how interesting it is to experience culture through food. And of course, there's biases in all of this, but the amazing thing is we get to own who we are and where we go. I hope you're going to enjoy the inspiration that LP has to share. So let's dive into the episode. The sponsor of today's episode is Midwest Mujeres, closing the gender wage gap one story at a time. They empower Latinas and Black women to unleash their voices for greater impact and wealth. MidwestMujeres.com. LP, welcome to Be the Glitter, where we talk about tough topics with giggles and leave inspiration that sticks. And I would love it if you could introduce yourself, how you like to be known.
Yeah, for sure. So I go by LP. I am the founder and managing director of Houstory. It is a startup that was an idea over 10 years ago about rental transparency for renters in big cities. And my background is in human resources and people and operations. And so this has been an interesting pivot moving into this tech space / renting space, but it's been a really fun one.
I love it. And what are your pronouns?
She, her.
Okay, excellent. Always good to know and always good to put it out there. Mine are she, they. I love how you have this amazing identity story. And I think it ties in so well with your why for Houstory. But first, before we get so into Houstory, because we're going to totally dive into that, do you mind explaining your identity story?
Yeah, I think from our first conversation, it was a lot of, say, this doesn't make sense, but it's going to make sense eventually, right?
I love that.
And so I'm actually visiting in New York City for about a month, and I'm actually in my best friend's childhood home where I spent a lot of my childhood here. And so I grew up, my family is mostly Black American with Caribbean roots. My mother was raised Catholic. My father was raised Muslim. And we lived in an area in Queens, and we also grew up eating kosher. Growing up, I just didn't really think about the nuance of like religion and food and anything, because to me, it just seemed normal that things were really cross-cultural. Growing up, practically my best friend's family is my second family. They're from Puerto Rico. So I grew up adjacent to them and their cultures. So there are certain words that I learned first in Spanish from them and from my godmother that also contributes to this like shaking of identity. And I think I also told you when we spoke earlier that I didn't realize that Muslim people didn't regularly eat kosher until I went to college, and I realized that that wasn't a standard practice. But my identity has always been like that. And then when I came out, I remember when I was trying to think about how do I describe who I am, and lesbian didn't quite seem to get it. I think it didn't quite seem to capture everything with my own like understanding of gender and sexuality. So I have always leaned towards queer, much to the dismay of my parents. But the queer identity was also another identity that didn't have to fit into a box, right?
Yeah.
We were Catholic Muslims that ate kosher and also ate a lot of Puerto Rican food and I went to Puerto Rican day parades and did a lot of activities, but that to me just made sense for who I was. And that's the same thing for queer. It's just ambiguous, but it makes sense.
I love that. So a friend of mine likes to say, I don't care where you fit on the flag, but if you look at the flag and go, yeah, I'm on that flag somewhere. That's good enough for her. And I also think that so much of scarcity mindset and some of the big problems of the world, let's just put it broadly like that, is trying to fit everybody into a box. And if, it's either black or white, and it's square and it's square and it's squares. Like, that must be like this. And that is just not how the world works. In fact, it's just so much more beautiful when we can have such a tapestry of experience like you had growing up. And I'm very envious, frankly. I've always been one of those who just wanted to try all the different foods, experience all the different cultures. I should have probably been an anthropology major or something, but
Queens.
so cool, right? Growing up in little Door County, Wisconsin was not the right place for me.
It's really interesting because I think I also said to you when you were chatting earlier that I just like in the heels of COVID, I moved down with my now wife to Maryland. And that was the first time that I went to school in upstate New York, so I saw it a little bit there. It was very much like black and white. Most of my relationships have always been interracial relationships, including my marriage. And it was kind of shocking up there, but people usually got over it pretty quickly. But when I moved to Maryland, it seems that things are still pretty segregated. And it was like very shocking. And so when I hear stories of people never meeting like a black person or someone from Puerto Rico or someone from Barbados or anybody else that doesn't look like them, that to me is so baffling. And moving down here has been so interesting, mainly more because people have so many stereotypes around New York City that are just, I don't know, based on movies. And they're like, oh, you lived in the rough and tumble of New York City. And I said, I thought this was the suburbs where I grew up. And it was very quiet. It's still very quiet. So it's just really interesting.
It is interesting. And, it also speaks to other people's experiences, right? So if they've had such limited experiences in their life and they've been protecting themselves from the rest of the world, then, that's how they're mirroring back to you themselves, right? So, they're getting this very dissonant response to you just because they themselves have limited their own experience. When I was in Kenya in college, I had this homestay in this village way up in the mountains. And my very first night, I'm talking to my host brother, Eric, and I could hear and see and feel behind me that there are all these little kids tiptoeing into the space. And he whispered to me, he's like, "You're their first white person." And I was like, totally get it. I'm here for it. And then I could hear that they were getting closer and closer. And then I could feel them freeze. Like they were so close. They didn't know what to do next. So I turned around and went, "Jump!" And they were like, "What?" And then they came running back. And one of the little girls just leapt into I hugged her. And then we were all just super friends after that. We're just total family. And it was just so great. And it was just I wish everyone could experience something like this. Because I think if more of us felt comfortable being a minority, I think even just for a little bit and just being part of that experience and also try to learn and embrace and absorb and understand somebody else's culture instead of fearing it, the world would be such a much better place.
I was having this conversation with my best friend, and we were talking about, as children, we knew that we were different culturally, but we thought that was just
normal.
whatever. We're like, okay, cool. You eat this, I eat this. Let's share each other's food. Like honestly, I miss our Thanksgivings and our Christmases. They were like the best of both worlds. Like my family comes from the South, so it's like home cooking, Southern food, and then their Puerto Rican food. It was like all together. And even how I cook now is so heavily inspired by that. And it's like, so it was, I don't know, it was a beautiful childhood. The friends that I've made, it was like no one cared about each other's background as a negative thing. It was always like really exciting to learn about other cultures, but mainly because the food was so good. And we were just about the food.
It's the best way to explore culture is through food, truly. And, that's where I think some, what's the right word? Hypocriticism comes from. Like people are totally cool with, eating Mexican food, for example, but they're not cool with Mexicans. It's like, oh, come on. That's not okay. Although, let's face it, some people can't handle the spice of the mildest jalapeno. And how are they going to handle the rest of the world if they can't handle that, I guess? I don't know. If cinnamon is too hot for you, then we're going to have some problems.
If avocado is too much of a condiment, you need to start asking yourself some questions. It's really interesting because so my wife is a Chinese descendant, and we would have I would go to her family or family friends extended events, and I'd be the only Black person there, and they would watch me how I pick up chopsticks and how I do these things, and they're just almost amazed a little bit. And they're just really funny because I'm just oh,
look
guys,
at her work those chopsticks.
Okay, but I wouldn't be consistent with it. I'd be I would grab it for certain things, but for rice, I would always use a fork. And so they were teasing me about that. So it was really interesting, but it was, yeah, I feel like it just in embracing other people's culture, people just really, really love that.
Yeah.
That's just a funny story. Yeah.
And okay, so how would that look if cis het people just tried to embrace a little bit of queer culture, even if all it means is going to drag bingo? Just try it. It's a very happy place.
I think that and this is my theory, I have a lot of them. My theory is that there are a lot more queer people than are willing to admit.
Yeah.
And they let fear hold them back. Because some people can make a choice in terms of sexuality. If you are bisexual and you like both men and women, you can choose to only date one. Mm-hmm. And I think some people let the fact that they can do that and put that on other people. But I think that if people are just a little bit more free about how they think about gender and sexuality, I think that they would be a lot happier. I know so many men, you probably heard of the studies about the stay-at-home dads or house husbands and how they're able to provide for their, breadwinning wives or what have you and have a fulfilling life, even though it goes against our current
patriarchal. Yeah.
And it's just people don't realize that there's so much freedom in that. I don't know if I shared this with you, but my childhood, I grew up with really strict gender roles. So I had two brothers. I was the only girl. So that meant my chores were the labor intensive ones that you do every day. So doing the dishes, cooking, doing laundry. To this day, I refuse to iron and fold clothes. It's my protest. Luckily, my wife is amazing. And so she does that. And my brothers got to shovel snow, rake the leaves, take the trash out, do all of those heavier jobs. My dad also had a business, and he took both my brothers at some point and was mentoring them in his business because they were seeing more male centered stuff. In fact, the first time I ever shoveled snow, that was my sophomore year in college on break. And my dad needed help because my brothers weren't around and his back was acting up. And so I started shoveling. I did a terrible job, but I had so much fun. And I was like, oh my God, I'm shoveling the snow. And then I was just wait, what if I challenge more gender stereotypes that I grew up with? And I just found it to be so much more freeing when you play with that.
You have to gamify it, or I do. I have to gamify it. Yeah. Growing up in Wisconsin, have definitely shoveled my share of snow. And I've learned that as a woman, the advantage we have is our thighs. So like when it comes to, so I almost turned it into a dance, and I just like slide and shuffle, and like get my thighs into it more than I get my arms into it.
Yeah.
Because that's what
that's what I
did.
Yeah, that's what I did. I was like all over the place. I was like doing this, and I was like, I didn't know what it was. But he didn't tell me. He's like, here's a shovel, and I was like, I only see my brothers do this through the window. I've only seen it on TV shows. Let me have fun with it. And I was like, oh my god, this is so much fun.
Yeah, yeah.
He did not like my work and had my brothers redo it when they came. But
he wasn't grateful for you to like at least clearing a lot of it. No,
I think he was just like, I can't do it. I need help getting this done. And what did I expect?
You're the last hope.
But
a lot of us grew up with those gender roles, right? And I don't even know how much of it is. Yeah, I just remember my brothers being really into dirt bikes. And so I wanted the green one. I wanted a Kawasaki because it was green. And then my dad was like, okay, but then you just have to learn how to actually maintain it. So figure out like how to take it apart, put it back together again, and you can have it. And I was like, oh, never mind. And it totally worked. It was like, yeah, no, never mind. I don't want to do that. And same with the horse. Like I thought I wanted a horse because growing up in the country, the kids in they grew up on farms and they would have a horse. And yeah, he would take me horseback riding on other people's horses. And I was like, oh gosh, I want a horse. I want to name it Rainbow. Da, da, da. You always hear about, I named everything Rainbow. I was so into rainbows ever since I was little. As soon as I learned about rainbows, I was all about rainbows. I had the magnetic clasp rainbow belt, like wore rainbows everywhere, named pets Rainbow. And I was going to have a horse named Rainbow. And then I learned that it's actually more fun to go help my neighbor friends muck the stalls once in a while in order to earn the horse ride. And then it didn't become like the everyday chore of having a horse. Still so grateful for that. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting how we learn that this is what women do. This is what guys do. And yet I was like such a tomboy that sometimes they were just like, what are we going to do? My mom was so afraid of me. She didn't say it out loud, but she had a gay aunt. She had a gay brother. Actually, it turns out she had gay cousins too that just didn't want to come out until their dad died. There's a lot of homosexuals in our family. And I think she was really trying to figure out how to deal with that. And then there was me who was just like wanting to get into all these things. And she was just like she was a feminist, but she also like,
it's the good for you, not for me mentality.
Like she was really great. She didn't want me to grow up too fast. She didn't want me too feminine either. She didn't want me shaving legs. She didn't want me wearing makeup.
Yeah.
I wouldn't get the perm. Like growing up in the 80s, that was like torture that I couldn't get a perm.
I think we had very similar-ish childhoods. I was very like t-shirt jeans kind of kid, but like mainly because like my mom was like both my parents are really conservative and they had their own ideas about like, so like, I'll give you an example from like when I was in my 20s and they're still living at home and leaving and coming back home. So I live near basically Long Island. So it takes an hour and a half minimum to get anywhere. And so like I would come back home at 11:30 at night, 12 midnight. And my mom would be like up waiting for me. My brothers will roll in at 6 a.m. Nothing. Yeah. And there's like this like weird double standard, but it just, as a child, I was like mostly tomboyish because my mom brought all my clothes. But then when I started making my own money, I was also obsessed with the color black. And so that's when I started buying my first black clothes, because I was told I was never allowed to wear it. I'd wear a lot of black. And then I would wear eyeshadow when I got to school. I'd look like a raccoon. And then, but as you could probably tell, I'm very girly. I'm just like naturally just very, very girly person that just like naturally came out. But I think that when I was younger, like wearing makeup and all these other things, you know, my mom was like, I don't want you to be like that girl with all the boys. Little did she know, all of my friends, including my brothers, knew that I had zero interest in boys. I actually have a really funny story. I don't know if this is going to be too divergent off task, but
do it.
So my first boyfriend, I only dated him because of my friend asked me to. And I think now in retrospect, I had a crush on her. So I wanted to impress her by dating this guy. And this is how we dated. We passed a notebook, like a ruled notebook, back and forth, and wrote messages in there. And that was great. I loved it. It was like I got the title of boyfriend or girlfriend, and I had a boyfriend, right? Because that was all that mattered. Like you needed to have that. And then I got to write, which I loved, and I got to, you know, read, and it was like low impact. But the day he crossed the line was before school started, before first period. He stood next to me. And I remember just being really angry with one of my other friends that was there. And I was like, why is he standing next to me? And she's like, Lauren, he's your boyfriend. And then we broke up because I thought that was too far. I mean, that should have been a sign that I didn't even want to. And then this other guy that I dated, we were on AIM messaging back and forth. He said he wanted to take our relationship IRL. We went on one real date, but we were mostly AIM. And then when he said that, we met up at McDonald's and we broke up because I was like, I can't do that. I'm sorry. And then another boyfriend that I had, you're walking to school and he like grabs my hand. And then I break up with him at school because I thought he went too far. I was like, how dare you hold my hand? You're pushing it, buddy. These are all signs of like that everybody else saw. It seemed like my parents refused to see it. It seemed like I really refused to see it, but it was just like this utter disgust of being like, ew, why would I date you? I just couldn't.
That is a riot. Oh, wow. Yeah. I think I was so desperate for love. And I think the reason why my mom didn't want me shaving my legs, wearing makeup, having a perm, so she didn't want me having sex. And she just would always associate that with sluts, you know?
Yes.
And I was beating up boys that I thought were cute. So like clearly I was confused. And I always had more guy friends than girl friends. And I was always one of the guys, and until the cute girls would show up and I would have to go hide while they could flirt with the girl. You know, they didn't want me distracting them or getting in the way of them getting girlfriends. And so that was interesting. And it wasn't until I was in college that so many lesbians were into me. And so like I would be out dancing and stuff, and my boyfriends never were really into dancing. They liked watching, you know? And so I would be dancing on the dance floor, inevitably dancing with lesbians, having a great time. Then afterwards, the lesbians just being like, I really need your number. And my boyfriend standing there, and they're like, oh, this is interesting. Like,
which
but me too afraid to do anything with that.
Yeah, and this actually happened all the way through, even after college. I don't know if this term is offensive now or not, but like I am considered like a gold star. I don't know if people still use that language.
What does it mean?
So it's just like somebody that's never like been with men. But the way that I think of it, it's like I never had to. I was really firm with my boundaries. I knew that I was not interested. Like a part of me is like, he's cute. I want the title of girlfriend. I want the boyfriend, but I don't want anything to do with him.
Yeah.
But it was like when I went to school. And so this is another thing that I saw, like when I left, like I saw like the like racism in a different light.
Yeah.
And that was surprising to me because to me, I know who I am. Like the most important thing at the time I was vegetarian, now I'm vegan. That was the most important thing to me. But to other people, they saw what they saw. And so they all assumed that I was straight. And even after college, dating was very hard. Even when I would date, people would assume that I was straight, if not straight, bisexual. And it was like this whole thing of like pushing up against stereotypes. And like with women, it was funny. With men, I just told you, like, I broke up with them and I just didn't care. I was a little savage. Like, I had no care. With women, it was like I was terrified. And I was like so shy. And they probably thought that I was like the straight girl that was like, I don't know what to do. Versus in real life, I was like, I don't know how to, I don't like, you know what I mean? Like, there's not a blueprint playbook to this.
Oh, 100% no. Yeah. 100% know that. Absolutely. I could cannibalize too much time on this, talking about all the ways I know about that. Yes. Yeah. And I loved how you were also talking in our earlier chat about how you like to identify, and almost like when you are sensing a stereotype that is limiting your abilities, you will dig in your heels on what your identity is to put yourself in the place of opportunity, but it's not an incorrect identity because you have such a multifaceted background. And maybe you can, do you remember what I'm talking about? I don't want to say it for you.
I'm trying to think. I mean, we said,
I know we did.
So yeah, like I'm not quite sure. I don't really, what?
I remember I think we were talking about, the scary thing with people who are anti-immigrants and how there's such a threat of ICE and whether or not we even want to be American or not. And if we want to live like maybe we want to still be American citizens, but we don't necessarily want to live in the United States anymore. But the fear of, I think we were talking about people who are considering leaving the United States, but they're afraid they might not be allowed back and all that. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, a little bit. So like I had this conversation with my wife where I like woke up one day and I have very vivid dreams. I'm a very vivid dreamer. And I had a dream that I was being detained by ICE.
That's what it was.
Or maybe I wasn't being detained, but I was being questioned by ICE. And so I know my history because the women in my family are amazing. On my dad's side, his sisters are amazing. They trace our lineage all the way back to this enslaved woman named Susie, and this man that she was with. I don't think they were allowed to get married, but they think it was love. They had a lot of kids together. I think he was an Irish immigrant descendant, but they had a bunch of kids together. And those kids were my grandfather's either grandparents or great grandparents. So we trace it all the way back there. And so like, I know my history, like I know where my ancestors come from, sort of. I mean, there's only so much, only speculation beyond that. And so like in this dream, I had this person yelling and screaming in my face. And I was so angry. For context, I was born in Flushing, Queens, and I spent my first couple of years there before moving out to Belrose. And I spent a lot of time around immigrants. Undocumented immigrants, documented immigrants, children of immigrants. That's just like my norm.
Yeah.
So to me in this dream, I was like yelling at the guy and I could tell him, "We're going to deport me to Queens. My parents were born in Queens. My grandparents were born in South Carolina, or Florida or Alabama. My great grandmother was born in St. Croix, still a U.S. territory." And I'm like going through my lineage and history and said, "Can you do the same? Because I bet you if you go 1, 2, 3 generations back, you don't have that same length of time. And you seem to forget like where you came from."
Yeah.
And that's a really big thing. And then I also get really angry too, because of my mother-in-law and father-in-law. They're U.S. citizens now, but they, were born in Taiwan and came over to the States. And I can only imagine like they might be the ones that would come up against this. And I was just like, they're they're the most Americana family I've ever met. Them and the family that I grew up with, they're the two most Americana families that I can think of.
Yeah.
For some reason, the legitimacy is got challenged because of the accents, because of those things. But in my dream, I was not letting ICE do anything. I was very upset and angry because I was just like, I think this is ridiculous. We need to go through this lineage. Like, I'm American too. Why is my Americanness being questioned? And this is not the first time it's happened. This has happened throughout my career where I've had people, and I don't know what is it about my face that says to people that it's okay to be disrespectful or to be racist. But I've had usually men come up to me and ask me, why do I identify as a Black American? He's like, oh, you have the qualifier. And I was like, that qualifier I didn't put there because I'm an American, but that's not good enough. And it still mean other. But yeah, it's crazy. And it makes me want to look at other options outside of the US. But this is also my home. And, my ancestors fought to be here. My family's fighting to be here. And I don't think that anyone should be pushed out of where they live. It should be a choice that they make in peace, not in protests or in pain.
And that's just it. Who is anyone to tell us what our identity is? I think that's where a lot of that comes from. And I love how, again, home and where you're from is such an important part of who you are. And that's basically your experiences in dealing with houses and homes and renters and landlords has brought you to this amazing business that you've started. So now that we've talked about your story, let's talk about Houstory. Like that? Just came up with that.
Love it. I mentioned to you that this was an idea that I've had for some time now. And I say some time now, 2012, I think it's when it first started to form. So I had my first job out of college. I was a program director of an after school working with at-risk youth. An elementary school located in Brooklyn. A lot of my population was undocumented, first-gen English language learners. Some of the students didn't even speak English. They were just great kids. They were deemed at risk because they had less opportunities than kids that had a little bit more access, school funding, things of that nature. And I wanted to move out of Belrose. Remember, I told you this is the middle of nowhere. And living on my parents' roof, I got a brief of freedom when I went away to school. And that's when I finally started to discover myself and understand my identities, or beginning to understand my identities, because I think it's a lifelong journey. I'm still learning about myself. And then, so I started looking for places. And so I was, an honor roll student. I was National Honor Society. I was on a debate team, mock trial team. I was I would say an A- student for most of my academic career in my high school. I was one that volunteered a lot. People in the neighborhood knew who I was. People treated me as, oh, that's the good kid, the nerdy kid that likes to read, all those things. It wasn't until when I was looking for places that I started to see a very different reaction. So I talked to someone on the phone. I speak exactly like this. This is how I sound.
Yeah.
And the second I walked in, I was asked, oh, what's your credit score? It must be bad. And then I kept hitting this again and again. And I was just like, why are they treating me like I'm bad? I knew the reason, but I didn't want to believe the reason.
Yeah.
And this kept happening. And then I think you probably saw some of my videos on my social page. I talk about this apartment from hell that I had where I was scammed by a real estate company that's no longer in operation. And they took my money and then did the bait and switch, put me in an apartment that was, I don't know why the apartment wasn't condemned, but it had bed bugs, roaches, and ticks. Wasn't maintained. The building had a habit of pushing people out and evicting them. Their super got brain cancer. And when he died, they threatened to kick out his widow and his kids.
Oh my goodness.
Almost like the dirt wasn't even like, it was still fresh. And it was just like these things kept happening. And I just remember thinking like, there has to be some way to like find out this information because everyone's lying to me. And then everyone's treating me this way. And I remember even when I found my dream place finally in a different part of Brooklyn, like the landlord said that she wanted to meet me to check my vibe. And I was nervous and I was like, oh my God, she's going to see me and not friend to me. And then she saw me and was like, great, I'm ready to move in. You seem like a nice person. And really what she was doing was she wanted to make sure that I was going to add to the community and not take from the community, and saw that I was just like trying to find a place to live and try to make it work. And she saw that. And that was like my saving grace. But it was just story after story of being someone talking to me on the phone, loving what I'm saying. And then I meet up with them and they treat me like I'm a criminal. And I was like, what did I do to deserve this behavior? The only criminal thing that I do is jaywalk. But everybody does it in New York.
I really try not to be honest. My friends make fun of me.
I discovered what time blindness is. So if I need to get somewhere, I timed it out exactly. I'm not waiting for that light.
So what does Houstory do exactly?
So Houstory, what it does, so it's a couple of things. I'm currently building the app. It's intended to bring all the information about a unit to the forefront. So that way, if you're like me and you're searching for a place and if someone does a bait and switch, at least you have the knowledge about what's going on in that apartment, what's going on in the history of that building, who the owners are, what sort of problems are going to come up. And then it also provides a place for people to give feedback and reviews. So if I meet with somebody and they said this in email and then didn't rent to me and said something else to me, I want that to go there too. So that way people could be held accountable for things that they're doing and things that they're saying. Mm-hmm. Like for example, because I'm currently doing interviews with folks. I had one person tell me that they were interviewed by this real estate agent to find a place. And the real estate agent says, well, I don't really have any places for you. They found out through one of their coworkers that's working with the same real estate agent that they were able to place them in less than 2 weeks. The difference between that was that she was a Black woman and he was a white male. And her coworker told her, he's like, yeah, I think the reason why he didn't want to work with you is because you're Black people. And like these things happen. So Houstory would also be a platform for people to let us know exactly what's going on, to bring that to the front.
Yeah.
Because I think transparency is so important.
Huge. Yeah.
It is. The lack of transparency is a means of control. People intentionally hide things from you. It's being manipulative, and it's done because they want to gain something over you at a disadvantage. But one thing that I learned in my career in human resources, as transparent as I could be, depending on the situation, led to trust being built, led to when I had those difficult conversations with people, led them to understand and grasp it better because they knew, at least working with me, that I'm going to treat them like a human, treat them with compassion, and be as transparent as I can be about something. If I can't tell you why something is, I'll tell you I can't tell you why. But here are what I can tell you, and this is what I can do for you. And I think that level of respect is something that people want and that we don't.
Yeah. Look at hotels and Airbnb and so forth. Like, they thrive on ratings and testimonials. And how do you get that with rentals? It's not quite the same.
No, a lot of it's bait and switch. I don't have the exact numbers with me today, but the in New York City in particular, the data shows that when people find a place, and I don't say love it, but they don't hate it, they stay there. But until they get there, they hop around like crazy. I don't know if you know anyone that lives in a big city. It's probably the same way all across the states, but I know in New York, I've hopped around. So like I went from Queens to Brooklyn to the Bronx, back to Queens to Brooklyn to Queens to Brooklyn again, because I wasn't sure of like what, because there was always a problem that came up that was like too much. So I was like, I don't want to live like this. I was very fortunate. I grew up in Belrose. I knew what it's like to live roach free, rat free, to not have to worry about someone stealing our bike or whatever, to moving to different areas of the city and then having all these other problems. It's like, I can't walk around late at night in this area. Like it came up. So I would move around. And so, and that's a story for a lot of other people renting in New York. They move around a lot until they find something that's not terrible, not even good, just not terrible, but they really don't have a lot of freedom. And everything is sort of like they find out after they sign a lease and they're stuck with a year or 2-year lease.
Yeah, it's true. That happens, especially, I think, even more so in Milwaukee and Chicago, not terribly far from me. It happens here in Madison too, but Madison's more like a big, small town. And you get to, literally what feels like the biggest crime here is bike theft. Whereas in Milwaukee and Chicago, like people do move around based on safety and whether they feel welcome or not, segregation, gentrification. There's a lot of different reasons for people moving around.
Yeah. I don't think I mentioned this when we spoke the first time, but I was looking into my own family history. And so like I confirmed this through storytelling. So that's a really big thing with me is I learned, and we forgot this, right? Because there's been a breakdown of community, a breakdown of identity, but I digress with that.
No, oral tradition. I studied post-colonial literature, and like oral tradition is a huge way that people would, provide very necessary and mythical information as well. Yeah.
And what I've noticed, especially with my generation, it's like, or should I say that my parents are boomers, with their generation is that, so this is my hot take, that the boomer generation is the most selfish generation. They have the most resources available to them. They also contributed to the erosion of community because they were able to be more selfish. So they didn't pass as many stories down. But I was a very inquisitive child and even more inquisitive adult. I ask a lot of questions, which scares people. But I remember hearing stories of my mom and my dad when they were trying to find a place in this neighborhood, how they would be like, oh, that house, we wanted it. We went $20,000 above the asking price. And the guys took it off the market because he didn't want to sell it to a Black family. And then when the realtor was taking us around, so I lived in Belrose, they were taking us to Hollis, which Hollis was primarily a Black American, Caribbean American neighborhood, but overall, it had a lower social economics, I would say, status at the time than Belrose did. Less taxes, less infrastructure, things of that nature. And they were being pushed to buy in that neighborhood and not in this neighborhood. And they eventually found a home here that they purchased that I spent my childhood in. But about a year later, my mom convinced my best friend's family to move from Brooklyn to Belrose. And when they were looking at homes, they were like, the person didn't show you any of these homes? They've been on the market when you guys were looking. And my mom was like, no, they didn't show us this home. And my best friend confirmed it because I was talking to her about that. And she was like, yeah, they showed us at, the different places that they moved to or that they were looking at. And they didn't show the same homes to my mom and my dad. And New York City has this history of redlining, which is one of the reasons why every zip code's a different ethnic group. Part of that was intentional for some groups. They were forced, or should I say not forced, they were only allowed to live in certain areas. And now those same areas that were historically underfunded and had lack of resources are now being gentrified at alarming rates. And they're targeting these communities that redlining negatively affected and kicking them out en masse. So we don't really see so much gentrification happening in Belrose. At the time, Belrose was mainly Italian and I guess Irish American. Growing up, it was also a lot of Indian Americans that lived here. But Hollis, Jamaica, Black, Caribbean, island folk, as I like to call them, those are the areas that were redlined. Now those are the areas that are being heavily gentrified. And I wonder, is there a pattern, right? Because you have Bushwick, right? Bushwick used to be like Puerto Rican and Black predominant mainstays. Now they're being pushed out en masse. But Ridgewood. I don't think the same thing happened to Ridgewood. Like, like if you look at different areas and you're like, why did they choose this area over this area? It's just, I mean, that's one of the biggest things about New York City. It's the largest legally segregated city in the US. And, but now we're seeing the impact of gentrification against certain zip codes that have historically been for certain marginalized groups that are now being pushed out. That's something that learning that history, like even for my family, just also fuels my decision about Houstory. I think people should know.
Yeah.
People have the right to know.
And so as part of Houstory, are these stories being shared then? Are they encouraged to blog, or you're saying you're interviewing people? How is it a little bit different from some of the other platforms where there's ratings and testimonials?
Yeah, so the ratings and testimonials seem to be a bit random. So like I'm looking at, there's a couple of sites that would come close to doing part of what I'm doing, right? So it's not only the information. The thing is, I don't want to be a realty website. I don't want to be a place where you look for homes to rent. I want you to go there to look for information on places that you are renting or that you plan to rent. So that way you can find all the information about that property in one place. So I don't want it to be a real estate website because I want to stay as neutral as possible away from that. And so as far as the reviews and stuff, one of the things that I really care about is having everything be data driven. And so these things will be verified and not just people just saying, oh, I didn't like the landlord because he had a mustache and he hated me because I had blue hair, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to be like, okay, so this is the picture of my missing smoke detector. This is the picture of tiles falling off the ceiling that has been going on. This is me living without hot water for a year. And this is me with the email to the place. And this is the court documents that I filed. That's open record that my landlord just haven't done anything. And so I wanted that information to be pulled there. So in terms of collecting stories, I am reaching out to people and interviewing people, getting their stories, getting their perspectives. I think you and I had a conversation about a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
But it's been really insightful just talking to people to get their perspectives about their journey. And I do want to make that part of Houstory to let people know that, like, regardless of what you look like, regardless of where you live, right? You don't live in New York. But you had very similar experience. I think we bonded over that. There were some experiences you had that I was like, oh, I know what that's like. So I also want to bring that to the forefront because I also want Houstory to be a place where people can learn about their community and contribute to it as well. So just a lot of things about building a knowledge base, building trust and being transparent, building community and using these tools, AI, technology, to bring all this to the forefront, to make it easier for everyone to find information.
I love it. And I think through that, you get to expose some stereotypes and some mistreatment that's so not necessary.
Yeah. And then you also get to learn that, unfortunately, I know life's not fair, but there are times where things are really insidious how they happen. And I want to expose the patterns. And sometimes people are really hesitant to that because when you expose what's actually going on, like the pushback that I've gotten was people still want to believe that the world is inherently good and this doesn't happen. I'm like, this happens and this is what it looks like. But if we all talk about our stories, guess what? We can force them to change how they're behaving. So that is the goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Shed light where people are shoving the stories into the shadows. So we are doing a great job of talking for an hour. So I would want to say how, first of all, thank you so much for sharing everything. I mean, this is so good. That's why we do this, right? We talk it out. We share these stories so people can educate themselves in a very comfortable way, resonate with those who also have experienced something similarly, or at least just curious. And I think you have such a wonderful story and so many more to share, and such a great vision for how to illuminate so many other stories to continue this wonderful ripple of I call it, like, let's just build big waves and tsunamis of change, right? We just need big cleansing. Maybe I shouldn't use the word cleansing, but just big, powerful tsunamis of social change with more acceptance and love than hate.
Yeah.
So in all of this, obviously, you've also experienced some awesomeness and some really good people in your life. So who deserves some gratitude from you and a big shout out?
I'm going to have to shout out my dear friend, Anne-Marie.
Aw.
She is amazing. She has been doing some pro bono consulting for Houstory, really been helping me lay a foundation and strengthen some of what I'm doing, some background. And she's just an amazing person, amazing friend. And I'm just so excited and privileged to work with someone that amazing. So I'm definitely going to share your contact info with her because I definitely do need to connect. She's doing amazing things in film.
Cool.
But yeah, for queer film, and is just an amazing person she's very inspiring. She's a very inspiring person to talk to. So
I love
I'd
it.
say my shout out goes to Anne-Marie.
I love that so much. We'll have to share her links in this as well. And what do you need? How can we help you?
So for me, the biggest thing is I'm looking for people that are interested to share their stories with me. I really like talking to people, getting their perspectives, their stories. And then for people to let me know if this is something that they want, to sign up for my wait list. Sign up for my wait list. So that way, when we are ready to launch, you'll be the first ones in the queue to get this app. And so that way, you won't have to fiddle around and find it. You'll have that. And so that's one of the things that I'm working on. And that's one of the things that I would need, that and follow my socials and to hear my crazy stories for renting.
Which would be so fun to turn into some dramatic, mini film series or something.
Renting in New York. Yeah. Yeah. Crazy.
Somebody could animate it. That would be so cool.
That would be so cool.
Like the Eon Flux version of oh, I love this. Well, thank you so, so much for everything. Thank you for sharing your inspirational story. I know so many people can resonate with this. And thank you for being who you are. Thank you for doing what you're doing. And thank you so much for being the glitter.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know this is old school, but this is shout out to my millennials.
Yes. I love this so much. Oh, well, thank you so much. We'll definitely have your links and any other associated links that you want in the show notes and description of this podcast and all the different places where you can listen to it and watch it. Yay. Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much, LP. And I really hope that you take the time to give a look at the links in this description, in the podcast notes, and give her some love at Houstory. She's on many different socials. And of course, if you give Be the Glitter a little love yourself, subscribe, share, and comment with love, engagement. Let other people know. Give us some great ratings. Let's spread the glitter. Thank you so much.